Da-da-dun, da-da-dun, dun-da-dun, da-da-dun. Hey. Hey, hey, hey. Jeremy. Okay. As you can see from the headphones, I am doing none other than an impression of Miles Morales in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, a few of you might be wondering what exactly this video is going to be about today, so let me get right into it. I thought that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was one of the best Spider-Man movies, if not one of the best superhero movies ever created, and it did more for lots of different kinds of people than I would have thought from an animated movie. But first off, let me start with a quick, hopefully under 30 seconds, recap of why this Spider-Man is so different for the parents that don't know. Because the parents, you remember Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire. You remember the Amazing Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield. And you remember Tom Holland's, or Marvel MCU Spider-Man, Tom Holland. So there have been 3 different live-action Spider-Man for since around 2000, I believe. So that's a long 18, coming up 19 year span of Spider-Man. And then now we have this random movie called Into the Spider-Verse. So basically what you need to know is that Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man. So the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was made when Marvel was selling their property so they wouldn't go bankrupt. Then the Amazing Spider-Man was made because Sony wanted to retain the rights for their studios and not have it go back to Marvel. And then Sony and Marvel played nice, and Sony allowed Spider-Man to be used in the MCU. This is my review of what I think about the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and how wonderful I believe it is for all the viewers that saw it. Okay, so first of all, this movie had all the makings for being way too confusing to the average viewer because it dealt with the multiverse. If you're not as familiar with the multiverse is as it sounds. It's multiple universes. And technically speaking, there is a belief that there are multiple infinite universes that exist all around us, because if I decided to, grab this Spider-Man like this today, rather than maybe putting this Spider-Man here for this video, every choice leads to a different outcome, and there's infinite outcomes, okay? So this movie only deals with 6 of the Spider-Man and women and animal in the Spider-Man universe. And the pacing of the movie is excellent. It's spot on. And for as much that was going on and as much confusion that could have set in with 2 different Peter Parkers, Miles Morales in the same universe as Peter Parker, and then some of the other Peter, it could have gotten really ridiculous, but it didn't. And I am happy to say that it is one of the best paced superhero movies I've ever seen as well. Now, one of the aspects of this movie I love the most is the fact that this movie is one of the few superhero movies that actually is more relatable to children than the other MCU movies have been. And the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even the DCEU, DC Extended Universe. Oh, it's so terrible. Why can't they make a good movie? So even the DCEU hasn't been able to do this yet. They're trying to do it with Shazam, but they haven't been able to do it yet. This movie is so well done because had I seen this movie as an 8, 9, or 10-year-old, I could have felt like, man, I can really relate to Spider-Man. You know why I can relate to Spider-Man? Because he's near my age. So this is really one of the first times where, okay, Spider-Man's not late high school, not early college, not grown up. Spider-Man is in middle school, and he's Miles Morales, and he's just a regular kid, and it's just, and he's black, and he's Puerto Rican, and he represents minorities, and it's wonderful. And it was so well done because you could have been a child and been able to relate to him. You could have been a black child and related to him. You could have been a Puerto Rican child or a Latino child and related to him. And it was just, he just embodied a regular individual, and now he is Spider-Man, okay? And not only did they do that though, they had a Japanese girl in as Spider-Man. They had a white younger girl as Spider-Man. They had a cartoon character as Spider-Man, which we can't relate because we're not cartoon characters. Well, sometimes I act like a cartoon character. So anyway, I thought that aspect of it was excellent. It also proved that animated movies, because usually it's, we trust Disney and we trust Pixar and we trust the whole, it's moved into the 3D genre sort of movie telling with the CGI and everything. And we trust certain studios to be able to handle certain animated or quote unquote kid movies. This proved that another studio could do that, and it also proved that just because it's an animated movie doesn't mean it's not for the whole family, because there were so many heavy portions of this movie to the point where my sister looked over at me and said, "Are you gonna cry?" And I said, I feel like it. The pacing was excellent. The way it moved through fast storytelling and then slowed it down to really connect with the characters was fantastic. The last point I want to make about this movie: if you are struggling because you are a parent and your child is all over Fortnite and you don't agree with games with guns, if you are a parent and your child is all over something like Mortal Kombat, and we won't even get into how age inappropriate that is, or your child is into Deadpool, not age appropriate, things like that, this movie is such a breath of fresh air, because not only is the movie able to be seen by all ages, this movie soundtrack is able to be listened to by everybody. And I feel like I haven't seen or heard anybody talk about this, and I really think that that's one of the most important parts of this movie, is that you had a soundtrack. For example, the Black Panther soundtrack, okay? Black Panther did so much to bring, a full minority cast in, and all the portrayal of strong black women in that movie. It was excellently done. The album was not appropriate for children. And there were so many children who wanted to be Black Panther after that, no matter their race. They wanted to be Black Panther. The album itself was not appropriate for children. You could get the edited version, but the album in its purest form, as great as it was, and I think it was great. Pulitzer Prize winning Kendrick Lamar, I am all on your side on this. But the album wasn't appropriate for children, right? Doesn't take a genius to realize that. This Spider-Man album was. So if you are trying to find something that is age appropriate for your children to play, a Spider-Man game just came out on PlayStation 4 last year that had rave reviews. This movie just came out and this soundtrack is out. It's a great place to start. And it's a great place to start talking to your kids about how and why questions, and why do you like Spider-Man, and what version of Spider-Man was your favorite, and what were the differences. There are so many ways to show critical thinking in talking about this movie with your children. So if you're a little confused and you think, man, I'm not sure if I'm really gonna be able to follow the story, you will be able to follow the story. Your kids are gonna love you for it, and it's gonna be a great topic of conversation. But what I love most about this movie is, and hear what I'm saying, as much of a cultural phenomenon and how necessary Black Panther was for superheroes in general, this Spider-Man movie may have been more important. The reason that I say that is because as popular as Black Panther has become, most people outside of geeks and comic book nerds and people who followed it here and there really did not know about Black Panther. They didn't know T'Challa. They didn't understand how the technology that he possessed, how smart he was not in the forefront of comic book readers' minds. You know who is at the forefront of comic book readers' minds? All comic book readers' minds? I could make a case for this if you had to have a a Mount Rushmore of comic book characters, we know Batman and Superman are on there. They're not relatable. They're not relatable. You have a billionaire and then you have a man who can do anything. We know Spider-Man's on there, and I would love to hear you guys' comments of your Mount Rushmore, because I think that'd be great for Mount Rushmore comic book characters. The Mount Rushmore of comic book characters. But we know Batman and Superman are on there, and Spider-Man's definitely on there. Everyone knows Spider-Man. Spider-Man has invaded pop culture to a degree unlike any other. Spider-Man's been around for decades, okay? So here's my point. Because we had so many iterations and variations of Spider-Man, because we had him as a Black Puerto Rican young male, because we had him as a young white female, because we had him as a Japanese female, because there was a 1950s Spider-Man, and in the list, and then at the end, we are introduced to another Latino Spider-Man, okay? This is so important because it allows everybody to identify with a superhero, and not only just any superhero, not just, I'm so happy they finally put Black Panther on the screen and everyone loved it and it grossed over, $1 billion, and it broke all sorts of records. Spider-Man will always be more popular than Black Panther, and this movie solidified that anyone can be Spider-Man. And that is empowering. So, continue to develop a love for lifelong learning. I hope that this parent video for explanation for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has been useful to you, and now you can have conversations with your children that you never thought you'd have. Have a wonderful day, and we will catch you in the next video. Ooh, can't let you guys listen to it because it's copyrighted. Ooh, but I can hear it.